All right. Welcome everybody who's here already. And I just cleared out my chat, but I noticed that John Richardson's was here and Inverted Popes, and dang it, I cleared out my chat on accident. But welcome everybody. Thanks for being here.
I think
And
Audio Surgeon was here as well.
yes, awesome, awesome. We got the crew. Well, Hayes and I have already kind of gotten started in on it, but we just kind of got started on talking about how learning about electronics is kind of helpfully informed by having a background in programming. As kind of there's similar things going on, and you have to like think about input and outputs and whatnot. And I was thinking about how circuits involve a lot of logic and whatnot, but there's more to it than that as well. And so we wanted to just get to the basics of just some of the things that make synths work, and what some of our mysterious ideas, questions may be about to ourselves about how this stuff actually works. Dig deeper past what we know about this knob does this.
That knob does that. That slider does whatever.
Right. So, well, I kind of had an idea of just a basic question that's my big conundrum to start out with, because I've like watched all these videos of people building things and even discussing just all the time in their own ways what an oscillator is, and I can even see people working on it. What's an oscillator? But the thing is, to oscillate, see, I always thought it was to spin around. To oscillate is to spin, right?
It can
And
be.
so I always thought it was like make the circuit into a loop, and then once you make a loop and it spins on its own, then that's an oscillator.
Close. That's actually very close.
Okay.
It's more about making a portion in the circuit kind of spin, if you will, or bounce back and forth.
Uh-huh.
But
Oh,
that's
now I
kinda,
found the chat. I was in the wrong chat.
welcome
Okay,
back.
go on. Right.
But that's kind of a chasm for us to cross right now to get to that point, I think. I mean, we'll get there. We've got like a good hour to talk about this stuff. And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of really important before we really, like, I mean, a couple things. Like, but before we started the video, the first thing I want to do is like, okay, well, let's take a look at Wikipedia, because you've got
Mm-hmm.
Wikipedia out there to see like what the definition of an oscillator is. And I was really, I thought it was of interest that when you look for oscillator in Wikipedia, it redirects you to electronic or electric. Is it electronic? Yeah, electronic oscillator. And if you just look for oscillator, it redirects you to oscillation. Of course, now oscillator and oscillation are both related.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't think it's fair to say that an oscillator has to be electronic in the first place. I mean, I kind of have to, really? That doesn't surprise me, though, to see that in Wikipedia. I mean, as I was just saying to you, like, this is one of those things where when you
Right.
go to Wikipedia, you're going to get correct information.
Uh-huh.
But,
Yeah, I do and use Wikipedia quite a bit myself,
sure, me
and
too.
it can be dry, but and it can also be the aspects of it that aren't said or that are
Right.
misleading or whatnot. But
It's what's not said. That's the problem with these things. And okay, well, like, let's talk about like a trumpet, for example. How does a trumpet produce sound? How does a clarinet produce sound?
hmm.
They're two very related things,
Mm-hmm.
but they're kind of, they're a little they do it in different ways. And it's really cool because, what I've learned in studying acoustics is that, there's a word, like this dirty word that gets tossed around in the music world and with equipment. It's called impedance.
Mm.
What the heck
Yeah.
is that all about? We'll get to that. But, what I found of interest, though, is that when you talk about woodwinds and brass instruments, they have mouthpieces, both
Yeah.
of them. and the mouthpieces are different. Um, but what's interesting is that they couple. That's a very important word to the person, and there's a thing called wave impedance between the mouthpiece and the resonant chamber.
Yeah.
But we won't get into those details because I don't even. I mean, I am just a newbie. Go ahead.
But it's a lot. But you need a lot of force and a lot of impedance, because it literally is. You have to add pressure through. You have to put a larger amount of pressure through between that reed, or with your lips on a trumpet. You have to really, like, you know. It
Depends.
seems that
Yeah.
way. That's why
Okay.
your lips get tired.
Well, it depends on the quality of the instrument, of course. And if it's not the best quality, like my saxophone that I used when I was in the marching band, it's just you're always going to sit third chair. Be lucky to sit second chair, because the tonal quality is just not going to be there, and you're going to have to work 2 to 3 times as hard to get to blow air out of that thing, sufficient quality. But the thing about an impedance is like have you ever like emptied a bathtub before? Or like been at a hot tub where it was like gurgling all the time? Like you could hear the filters, or when you empty the bathtub, and it's like,
Yeah, it has that backup.
That is an improper impedance match. That's an impedance mismatch. You can think about it like that. And if you slow down the rate of the flow of the water that's draining, it'll be much smoother, and everything it'll actually kind of drain quicker, actually. Because it's not backing up, causing this oscillation. So what's interesting is that sometimes we want the impedance to be a mismatch, because that may be what causes the oscillation that we hear. It gets crazy. The important thing is that when you get into this stuff, is that honestly, nothing is intuitive about any of this, really. I mean, there is some logic that you can employ to it, but for the most part, it's very unintuitive, and you just have to employ a lot of observation and a lot of feedback, and just record your results, and go from there. Excuse me a second. I gotta adjust this headphone because I think it is the wire. I'm not sure. I'll talk about that later. Okay,
Well, I can't
I'm good
hear
to
it
go.
anyway. I don't think.
It's just me. It's the left cuts out.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I have that same thing, but I've got it just right now.
Yeah, it's a mechanical problem. I'm probably moving around too much when I'm jamming back here. That might be causing
So,
it.
Audio Surgeon says electronic vibrations possibly like in kilohertz? Question mark.
Well, what about megahertz or gigahertz?
I have no idea.
Same thing, but so electronic vibrations possibly sure, but electronic vibrations go all the way down, down to hertz, all the way up into the gigahertz and beyond, really.
Yeah.
But,
So. Yeah.
yeah. Like the important thing though is to kind of like understand that this really is all a representation of nature itself, and the fact that it's electronic is just a convention. And
Yeah,
boy,
and
what a
that's my
convention.
idea too. Like this, that's my dream, is basically to be able to wrap my head around that is true. But first, I have to prove it to myself, and in what ways, and then be able to explain it. And that's the goal.
Yeah, sure. So wrapping up the saxophone and the trumpet, just a gross overstatement. Oscillations are produced from the mouthpiece. Like in the case of the clarinet or the saxophone, you've got a reed.
Yeah.
And that reed is flapping, but it's doing a lot more than that. It's actually closing off, which causes things that I'm still trying to wrap my brain around. And trust me, this stuff is actually harder to understand than the electronics, if you want to know the truth. So we can just get this out of the way and get to the electronics, and hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to understand, just a little bit, right? But the thing is, though, is that you are producing oscillations. Now, I wish I had looked this up already, but I can't remember the name of it because I'm not Japanese and I don't speak Japanese. But it's like shozu or something like that. I've got it written down over here somewhere else. If I have a break, I can kind of look it up on Wikipedia somewhere. But out in the Japanese gardens, you'll find this next to like a stream of water, a bamboo apparatus.
Yeah.
Right, and it fills up with water, and when it fills up, it knocks over, and it empties itself.
And that's what signals the start of spring and everything like that.
Well, what it's used for is to scare away, critters out of your garden.
Hmm.
Because it just makes like a startling noise when it clack 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 clack. That's
But
an oscillation.
one of my first things when getting back onto YouTube a few recent years was a video of of just that going for 10 hours, you know,
Oh yeah.
and the trickling and gurgling, and it's just so satisfying. I highly recommend it.
Um, that's a very very simple mechanical oscillation,
Uh huh.
and I want to bring that up because it can be used to produce a square wave.
Right.
Yeah, I'm hoping this would be like what? Okay, just put that aside for the moment. Got a question here though from John.
Hmm.
See the partner effects processors with Korg glass something. Not sure. Compressor shelving and distortion. That sounds like a cool piece of equipment. Um,
The E357 was the cloud morphing generator from the. It's a module, and then I mean it's like I believe that's the one that has the four of them all at once, uh, and that it has a sort of XY thing going on to create a, de- a depth. It's
um,
just one of those that modules I've always wanted. It shows a little
gotcha.
screen of the wave and has it moving around. Is basically does one of those. It's a polygonal almost.
Oh, you mean the
Because you can go X, Y, and another dimension on the wave. You
Oh,
know
that's pretty cool. I haven't
that
seen
sort
that
of
yet.
thing. Yeah.
What I'm interested in is seeing harmonics, like the spectral view
Hmm.
of something, to see like what partials are ringing out, what harmonics are ringing out, and so forth.
Yeah.
Um, which I think I might be able to do with mine, but I haven't read the manual yet.
And
Really
like
need to
comb
just go to the manual.
filters and
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Um, I don't want to jump ahead, but
But
you
anyway,
can't
yeah.
see it right off the screen. But next to the oscilloscope is my function generator, which does a lot of cool things.
Uh huh.
Um, but before we created an electronic oscillator, which I can't remember when the first one was. It was either in like the very very early night. It had to be the late 1800s to tell you the truth, but it might have been the early 1900s. We should talk just a little. Go back and talk about microphones and speakers a little
Oh,
bit again.
okay. It was definitely the late 1800s. I know about some stuff that was going on there, trying to create organs already.
That's right. That's right. That
An
really
oscillator per
cool.
key.
Yeah, I really hope somebody tries to build that again in some capacity. In some ways, I think maybe the motor synth
Uh huh.
kind of like that in a
I was
way.
just thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. I
When you
wouldn't.
said does an oscillator have to be electronic? You
w-
know.
Well, yeah, right. Even something like that, though, even when it's mechanical, it's still being produced in a way. I mean, it's the mechanical side of it is being generated electronically, but then what it's being used for, in turn, is back to being electronic. So that's a pretty kind of chicken and the egg synthesizer right there,
Yeah.
and it sounds very interesting in a way. I still think the cat is out on the bag on that one to see like just how unique that thing actually sounds compared to like what can you do, because in some ways that's just sort of a tape warble effect if you think about it, but it may be more than that. Like I said, I haven't
Hmm.
heard anything
Oh, I
about that
actually
synth.
did just yesterday or something. Was it Floyd Steinberg? Maybe I could be wrong, but a guy in um, in the social networks that I look around actually had one and posted a video, maybe a January of it, and sounded cool. I forgot who that was. I think it was. I think I'm right. But anyway, uh, I saw lots of cool stuff yesterday. But yeah, the motor synth would be something that I would be interested in because it's one of those. It's like toes the line philosophically of like electronic or nature, you know. But as you say, if you get down into it, you realize electricity has a great part in a lot, you know, a lot of how the sound is generated anyway.
Exactly, and a quick jump into current,
Hmm.
current versus voltage type kind of thing. I guarantee you that's a synth that draws a lot of current. I guarantee it.
Uh-huh.
That would be my one of my main concerns with that synthesizer. Is like, whoa, this sucker's a power hog. It has to be. Maybe not. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into the specifications of it, but just going alone by the fact that it's using those motors,
Yeah.
that's what takes power to draw, and that's what it is actually. So I'm curious to see. It probably runs off off of mains voltage, so 110 here, 220 in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that hopefully towards the end.
So
But
you guys stick to the 220, huh? Over
220,
there in Europe.
221, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
I forget what it is over there, but because I'm over
That-
here.
Well, all I know is that I'm a little bit more sketched out about working with 220 than I am with 110.
Well, hey, when you get inside of an amplifier, you're actually working with 600.
Whee!
Yeah, it's no joke. I haven't done that yet myself, but yeah, it's no joke. Earlier we were talking about Dave Ratt, who's on YouTube, and I don't know if you know this or not, but he's the sound guy for the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Ah.
He's their lounge side guy. What am I
Oh my
trying to say?
gosh.
If I can talk, yeah, you know what I'm trying to
That
say.
man. Thank you so much, Dave Rat.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on these days, with that band. And, I mean, but he has his own company, so he's been like selling audio equipment, and anyway, so he's been doing a series of videos with his daughter, and his daughter is, she's a roadie,
Uh-huh.
so she's been doing like, I'm presuming right now that she's been doing like road gigs, working live sound for all kinds of bands, pretty much her whole career. I'm guessing she's in her 20s now, so she's probably been doing it maybe 10 years. She probably started as a teenager doing it. Maybe she dropped out of high school to do. I don't know. I mean, I guarantee you, like Dave is a surfer dude. He's a surfer
Yeah, he looks
dude.
like it.
And that's just awesome. And but anyway, so what's amazing is that, like, so just a good example. Here's somebody, Sammy, who's a professional, and she just learned, how microphonics work, or however you want to say it, how transductance works.
Yeah, you can work with these things forever and just go along with it.
Hey, look at me. I mean, how I've been doing this for like 30 years and no clue, Just for what it's worth, the thing that held me back in understanding was I just couldn't really grasp why voltage and current are two different things, and why we use one, why we want to use the other. That's a whole other topic for now, but that's really what kept me tripped up. And I think a lot of people are pretty confused about that. I mean, sure, you can know what the textbook definitions of each one is. You can learn Ohm's law all day long and be able to memorize it and do the math and the problems all day long. But the real kick is understanding when am I looking for current, when I have any problem at hand, when am I looking for voltage, when I have any problem at hand. And really, it's like, I would love to just tell you right now, but I think once you really figure that out, that's when you really have a huge aha moment about all this kind of stuff.
Uh-huh. And is that right there is what happens after you sit down with the components, right? And work with them, right?
Oh, okay. Some people can just jump right into the theory, which is how they teach it in school, and just learn the circuits and everything. But I couldn't learn that way for some reason. There was just too many things that too many questions that I had, and the class was moving on. All the other kids seemed to get it. They understood, and I was like, oh, okay. And that's just kind of the way that it goes. My problem is that what I needed was hands-on application. I think, like some people, yeah, you need to get the components in a breadboard and just figure it out for yourself the hard way, and just see, oh, okay, because like if you're like me, I can't sit back and rest with this, like, not knowing, knowing that I can use the math and pass the test, but not really know what's going on. That doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
So if you're like me, the answer, I think, is to just is to go buy a breadboard and buy some components, and you'll figure it out. I mean, that's the best thing to do if you really have the desire to do this stuff. We're on YouTube right now. There are so many teachers on YouTube that will tell you how to get started.
Yeah.
Well,
psychologically, it's scary, but
Well, you bounce
but a
around.
soldering iron is the cheapest thing and
Yes.
that's
And
all it takes.
hold this in, by the way. You hold this in, you smell chicken. Um, yeah, I mean, and excuse me, and there are some teachers on YouTube who are very good at what they do, and they'll admit they're afraid of touching a soldering iron. They won't do that. They won't touch mains voltage. They won't do anything
Huh.
involving mains voltage. Yeah, and so I mean, you bounce around and you find a bunch of different teachers and you kind of stick with the ones that that resonate with you. I think that's the best way to do it. Um, but I'm kind of bouncing around. I want to get to the
Yeah, getting back
microphones
to it. Yeah.
because this is the first big misconception. Is like Sammy asked a question. How does how does my voice travel through the electronic circuit?
Mhm.
And the answer is it doesn't. Something else does. And
Mhm.
then magic happens, literally. And then out the back, you hear your voice again. And it's no, I don't think it's any coincidence that magic and magnetism are very closely, are words, at least in English,
Uh-huh.
that are so close together because that's, it's magnetism and it's people want to think of like electricity as being like the big thing and magnetism being this kind of like smaller thing. It's the other way around. Magnetism is everything. That's how electricity works. It's electromotive force, really.
Right. I I kind of have always been in love with Tesla and a lot of just his kind of fringe stuff. Um, and I had a friend of mine actually that was even more serious about Tesla's experiments, and he came up with his own sort of idea for a completely renewable, a constantly renewable energy source out of nothing, out of just energy comes in, like is pulled in by it indefinitely, and that's what you get. But you have to control it, and then there you go. All with magnets and a sort of cone shaped apparatus that where things go a certain direction and whatnot. Um, and I'm sure you could probably find a lot of people who have come up with similar Tesla like designs for things that could do that, but they work on the smaller level in terms of generating energy. But there's always been so many options out there. That's like, if you have like people saying like, oh well, we're not there yet with the science, they don't realize that people have been doing all sorts of crazy things with electricity that you don't even know about for 100 years. you know
Yes, and unfortunately, because a lot of people don't really understand what's going on, it's real easy to be misled.
hmm
And it's also easy to hear things through the grapevine. And I'm pretty sure that Tesla actually didn't have any free energy devices.
right.
He really wasn't about that. The information or the research that he did that was suppressed was stuff that we can't even imagine because we're so used to literally the grid that is powering us right now. And like for example, just using AC and DC, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff to be talked about. And we do have a modern day Tesla right now who is alive and kicking. And his name is Eric Dollard. I don't know if
Hmm.
you can see this very well. Eric P. Dollard. And
Yeah.
yeah, he's very controversial. There's a lot of people who would like to take him down, But
Okay, that would make me read it. That would cause me to want to
oh,
read it even more.
oh yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
but
I always liked it.
what I really appreciate about Dollard is that he introduced me to a lot of real history that's really there. It's these people are the real people. They're on Wikipedia, and they just we always hear about Edison and we always hear about Tesla, Edison and
hmm
Tesla, Edison and Tesla. We never hear about Steinmetz, about Heaviside, or even we do hear about Faraday, of course, but like people don't really talk about like how awesome Michael Faraday was. And Michael Faraday was a really lucky guy in so many ways, but he's a guy who took that luck and turned
He
it
stumbled
into
in the right
because
ways.
like he was allowed to just play.
Uh-huh.
Like somebody just was like, "Hey, you're a genius. Here's some money. Go do research."
Yeah.
And that awesome. And but the thing is though is
That's
that
like the
he was a
composers.
genius.
That's like the classical composers. We know about them because they were the guys that got to be the ones that would be known about. But as a result, ended up being able to do amazing things as well. Kind of like the Beatles. It's like it changed their life to be
Oh man,
so
yeah.
popular, and then they went further in their musicality because of that.
See, I
think.
could talk for 4 hours alone about the Beatles. Seriously, I'm a huge. I mean, I used to hate the Beatles when I was a kid, and now I'm just like a huge Beatles fan. I still don't really care so much for the early stuff, but whatever. Anyways, yeah, we get off the beaten path, but
I don't care for my early stuff, but
this is really dry
yeah.
stuff, so it's okay if we kind of digress a bit.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. All of our early stuff is questionable. Actually,
I'm trying to make it really rough so that when people look back, they can go, "Oh yeah, wow, he went from that to." But really, I'm just not putting as much effort in right now for that reason. No, it's on purpose. I suck on purpose. Anyway.
Oh man, yeah, that's.
No.
No, speaking of effort, yeah, like when you start putting this much stuff together, it does become harder to craft something. So you have to like make more compromises. I've been finding, like if I want to produce something in a timely fashion, I've got to make so many compromises. So I'm learning how to deal with that. I think, kind of streamline and maybe simplify things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
But
so
back
but
to the subject of
microphones. Yeah, microphones.
yeah.
Like I think it's pretty important. I mean, this is so funny. Like one of the first things that I wanted to do was, if I can get this out, I'm gonna have to yank this out. Not a good idea. Okay. Well, yeah, that was definitely not a good idea. Everything just came falling right out.
Whoops.
This is like a microphone. I don't know if you can see it very well or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably in the way.
Yeah, kind of like a lapel mic or a headset.
Yeah, it's what's called an electret condenser mic. Electret. Not electric, electret. And it's a condenser mic. These things cost 25 cents a piece. A quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And you do the conversion to euros or whatever your currency is. But yeah, super cheap. And this is unfortunately this is not just going to work with any. Like I can't just plug this into anything and speak out of it. I've got to use a special preamp that I made because it has to take a voltage. I don't want to get into that too much, because that took me a long time to wrap my head around. But what's happening is that like if I take this, if I speak into this microphone right here, what happens is there's like the air, there's a diaphragm that actually is physically pushed by the air that's pushed by my voice. And it's very, very sensitive. Now, Michael Faraday discovered that if you have an inductor and you run a magnet across that inductor, it will cause a current and then a voltage to spike out of that inductor. An inductor is just a coil of wire.
Mm-hmm.
But this is very important. Like every time you take a magnet and swing it back and forth past it, it's important that it's this sort of alternating action. It causes a current to go one direction and it causes a current to go back in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can talk a long time about why this happens, but trust me, it happens. This is a fundamental kind of thing you need to kind of wrap your head around if you want to understand this stuff.
But always with magnets, or I mean, magnetism.
Well, let me put it to you this way. I mean, when you break apart this microphone, right, and you look on the inside of it, you realize this is almost like it's not as complicated as a watch, as a wind-up watch, but it's there's a lot of delicate stuff that's going on inside of here. Some very precise type kind of stuff that that we've known how to do for hundreds of years, really. But it's the important thing is that there is a magnet that's moving back and forth around another magnet,
Right.
and this causes a change in current. And here's the part that I still can't understand, and I may never be able to understand. This is the thing where, like, we discovered this stuff, right? We discovered it, and then we had to figure out, okay, how does this work? You know, we discovered a thing that led to an idea that led to more kind of breakthroughs, like pointing in a specific direction, but led to other things that kind of were unknown, which led to finally, like, wow, I actually transmitted my voice. And when Thomas Edison did that with Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Mm.
And we can still hear that to this day, right? I don't know if you've heard that or not, but you know, you can go find the MP3 out there, which is the actual recording of Thomas Edison when he first, you know, recorded that stuff.
Cool.
Or was it Bell Graham? Whoever it was. I think it was Edison, but whatever. Now, so what's really cool though is that this part is unfortunately kind of, you know, hard to wrap your head around, the voltage and the current aspect of things. But we're sending a current now. So this microphone, right, back and forth, and this wave file, this waveform, in a sense, is causing this motion, which is causing a proportional electrical current to flow. Very, very, very tiny, very tiny. It's in the measuring in volts, like millivolts.
So the waveform coming from our sound going into it is actually in turn creating the sound again.
It's not creating sound. It's creating an electric current.
Yeah, they're creating current. That's even weirder.
Yes, it's proportional to the sound waves, to the pressure level.
Okay, yeah.
That was exerted upon the diaphragm of the microphone. Now, yeah, that's magic, and that's the kind of thing where, like I said, I may never understand it myself. And again, I'm still a newbie at this, but like,
yeah,
you know,
and so you get to the point as you get where there's microphones that don't need to be powered, and then there's microphones that then need to be powered.
yes. This microphone that I pointed to you needs to be powered. But don't worry about that for now.
Okay. It's different. I mean, it's the amount of current coming from the vibrations into the microphone is not
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
All that matters is that it is. I mean, if I were to tell you that, I would lose you, unfortunately. So let's not do that.
Okay.
Talk about DC biasing and using coupling capacitors to remove it. Let's not go into that.
Yeah, that gets into lingo and all that, and learning all that. Yeah.
But okay, so hopefully now though you can see that, like, imagine, and I'm not going to talk about how a breadboard works. You know, just, you know, you can use it to redirect the flow of current and voltage. You know, do whatever you want to with it. These things are very powerful, by the way. I have a video showing, you know, me running 110 AC volts through it. And so yeah, they're very powerful little tools. Okay, so you got the microphone, and now we've got this current that's running through. It's a very small one, and we can talk about this later. But what we do is we amplify the signal. See, it's a signal now. It's no longer a waveform or sound pressure. It's now an actual electrical signal. And it's proportional, right? So it's crazy. And here's the other important thing though, is that it's alternating current. Because at some point I will have to break into this. I might have to break out a piece of paper or something. Can we see? Let me do this. I don't know how well you can see my oscilloscope.
I can see the line, but
Perfect. That's all that matters. If you can see that, like, it's a waveform, and you can see the center line down here.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the top stuff up here. Just this bottom waveform. Okay, everywhere where there's peaks that are above the blue center line, that's positive. And everywhere down here, that's negative. And the center line is our virtual ground. I'm going to call it virtual ground. We're going to say it's 0 though. It's 0 volts in this particular case. What I'm trying to tell you is that whenever you speak into a microphone, the resulting current is alternating. So your signal is going to be an AC signal.
Okay.
And yeah, so from here, what we need to do is we need to amplify it, because like I said before, it's very, very, very small. I mean, you have to kind of think about it, right? I mean, physically, this is a very tiny little microphone. It's a very little tiny diaphragm. I mean, it's moving just like millimeters,
Right.
fractions of millimeters.
That seems amazing to me, how the speakers and microphones can have such a sensitive, a thing that can be that accurate at that sensitivity. Like, how do you make a material even?
There's books on that. I've got a book right here, I do believe. That's phonograph notes. Which one is it? Telephones and microphones. Yeah, here's a book on telephones and microphones. Excuse me. I'll see if I can find the date on this one. I think this is from the UK. Yeah, London, England. Well, I can't find a copyright date, but it's like, it took me forever to find the copyright date on this thing. I think this one is like 1900. It's around 1900. I can't remember if it's in the 1890s or up to like 1913. And I can't understand what they're saying in this book. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, I'll read this, I'm like, okay. I don't have a mechanical engineering degree, and, that's like, I mean, 120, 130 years ago, and, they had that stuff down back then, and we've only improved it since. I mean, there are like, like some of those microphones that cost thousands of dollars, I mean, we could talk about that for a quick second. What's the difference? I mean,
Yeah, why would a microphone cost that much?
Right. Okay. Okay, so it's really cool. It's a really easy kind of thing that's going on. First of all, you have to ask the question: am I a professional? In other words, am I recording people professionally,
Right.
and getting paid to do it?
Yeah.
If the answer is no, then don't get a microphone like that unless you just got the money and you think maybe it's a decent investment. You're a hobbyist. You like that kind of stuff. It makes you happy. You like to touch it. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
and
I mean, but
that's
yeah,
how I feel about the whole thing, because the thing is like, since I'm not doing this day in and day out for everybody enough to need to do a certain thing, that thing is that I'm not going to do then is the acoustic treatment in a room, and therefore caring about having the right speakers pointed the right way at me, because I'm not treating my room anyway, and
Exactly.
not messing with that whole aspect of the expense of how expensive that would be to get there, and work with headphones instead, and maybe get open backs if I feel like this is not working to get a good enough sound anyway.
Right, and that. Okay, but here's the other flip side of it. Let's say you are a professional. Let's say you have a studio. Really, any engineer, of their salt, I will dare say, would say, like, you know what? A lot of times, like this simple microphone like this, I can make it sound just as good as $1,000 microphone.
Yeah,
They can.
they do say that, and
they
can
can.
show it.
Now,
Yeah.
here's the thing, though. If you've got a fancy client coming into your studio, you hang this down for them to sing. Here, sing into this. They're going to be like, "What's that $1,000? You got that $1,000 microphone? I want to sing into that." And even, and this has happened before, like where producers, maybe not the producers, but the recording engineers will like take an expensive microphone like that, and they'll put the real microphone behind it. Because I mean, really, the game at that point just becomes perception of your clients. It really does. And you're going to do whatever it takes to make them sound good, but you're also going to do whatever it takes to make them happy. And you're going to charge them accordingly.
And they want that.
Yeah,
they want to know that.
What are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? That's what you're going to do.
Um,
So that's that. I hope that it kind of explains a bit of that game.
yeah, and it's funny um, how people won't value a thing a lot of times unless it's expensive or more expensive, or they won't value you as much if you're not charging as, say, if you're charging, or if you're charging way more, they'll value you more than if you aren't.
Uh, yeah, yeah. It
Um,
gets to the point to where
they want to pay more just to know, even though there's no way for them to know. They'll pay more for a product for those reasons. It's just basic human psychology thing.
yeah, I agree with that. We that's another a conversation for another topic though is like
Yeah.
what you're actually paying for, when you purchase a piece of gear. And, just a quick 30-second, less than that overview.
Hmm.
Mostly the expensive stuff is the hardware and the electrical mechanical stuff, your potentiometers, your switches, your faders, those kinds of things. And anything
Hmm.
dealing with the enclosures itself. Like the enclosures can be very expensive actually. The housing of the whole entire thing. But the actual circuitry inside, cheap. It's crazy. See that's the thing nobody talks about is that regardless of what the clone is or who's doing what when on the inside, for the most part they're all coming from the same place. Especially
Hmm.
now that everything's SMD.
Yeah.
Gone are the
And,
days of vintage capacitors and all that kind of stuff. And it's like we finally it's like throw that out the window. It has nothing to do with the vintage nature of things necessarily. And it has nothing to do with the chips. It has everything to do with what the circuit calls for and the tolerance of your capacitors and resistors. It
hmm.
really is that simple.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, but we're,
The
again,
tolerance.
going like that's a whole nother topic.
But you were talking before about started to talk about impedance, and that's what the tolerance that you're
No,
talking about.
no. What I'm talking about is like when the resistor says that it's 1K, is it really 1K? Also,
Okay.
if the circuit, like if the circuit calls for 1K resistor, you know, a lot of times, like if it really matters, you may see them say like 1% tolerance, which you're not going to find in capacitors. Capacitors, I mean, you can like get 5% tolerance, but like most kind of cheap capacitors are maybe 10% tolerance, whereas the more expensive ones get into 5%. And what you're paying for is that like when it's rated at that value, how close to that value is it really? And that's just one side of the story. The other side of the story is does this component in the circuit need to be, how much leeway is there? Because there's a lot of parts in the circuit where like it doesn't matter at all. It's crazy. It doesn't matter. And this is where when you get especially, I mean, really analog, this is the huge difference. Why one brand of like one mini Moog doesn't sound the same as another mini Moog is
Hmm.
because those capacitors and resistors in there are not all exactly the same. And I mean, it matters. It really, really matters. Just jumping a quick aside, my TT-606 and my TT-78. What I found about them is very interesting. Is that they offer different hi-hat sounds. They're all analog,
Hmm.
but they'll have like different like hi-hat and different cymbal sounds. And when I did a little more investigating on the TR-606, the original Roland, and seeing some like videos showing comparisons of the old 606, like two different 606s versus each other.
Yeah.
Most of the differences are in the hi-hat and the metallic sounds because of the different values of capacitors mainly, and some resistor values. Now,
Yeah.
what's interesting though about the TT-606 that I have, the new clone, is that these different hi-hat metallic sounds, that's what they are. They kind of represent the different kinds of major sort of ranges of tolerances that like that things have gravitated towards, because not only does something start out a certain way, but as we know, as time grows, the values kind of the current works a path through these components, and it breaks through these sorts of like passive least resistance in a sense within the component itself, which changes the value that they operate at.
Yeah, and I learned that actually from Modular. I think, yeah, Loopop did a video on this module that I forgot the name of it, but it allowed you on just the face of the module to put to replace the capacitors, to take out of the capacitor and put an either larger or smaller one in, depending on, and I believe it was for the purpose of low pass gate, or maybe filter, to have
Yeah,
different curves and different
you
amounts
can.
going through.
That's interesting. That's kind of a novelty in a way.
Yeah.
That's interesting though. I mean, they could just. I mean, what you could have. I mean, the problem with that, of course, is you got a small size. You got very little
Uh-huh.
real estate to work with.
Oh, it was LFOs. So it
LFOs,
meant
yeah,
that,
okay.
yeah, there were four of them next to each other, and they were all different sizes. But that's the thing, is they were interchangeable, so that you could even bring in your own capacitors and just put them in, and the LFO would either be a longer duration or a shorter duration.
I want to talk about that here in a second because that is getting back into oscillations
Hmm.
and why oscillations do what they do. Think about that for a second. Like when you add a capacitor of a larger value, the larger
Yeah.
capacitance,
Hmm.
it produces a slower rate. When you use one of a higher capacitance, it produces a higher rate.
Yeah.
Now, don't think about that logically. Don't think high, high, low, low. You can't think about that way when it comes to electronics. You have to understand what's going on behind the scenes. We're getting there though. What I wanted to, back to the microphone before we're almost done, but
Hmm.
okay, we're going in from the microphone, changing our acoustic sound pressure waves into an electrical current. We're going to amplify it. We're not going to talk about that right now, but we're going to amplify it, and then
Amplify
that's
it.
going to basically have more. We're going to get to the point to where we're producing more current, and that's going to push a speaker. Do I have a speaker I can show? Yeah. Here's a little speaker, and got two terminals here, two
Hmm.
terminals plus and minus. You want to get that right for the proper phase, but we'll talk about that later if we get to it. That knob right there. What is
Hmm.
that? What is that knob sticking out?
Is that a capacitor?
It's a magnet,
Okay.
basically. All right, that's the what's that called? It's called something. Somebody in chat help me out here, but that's the core, the whatever, and that is what when the current. Excuse me, I don't know even why I'm even trying to point this out to you. You probably can't see it,
I
but
can
these
see.
two. Okay, cool.
Oh,
These two
well.
terminals, when the current flows through back and forth, it causes the speaker to jump that way, back and forth. Magic, magnetism.
Hmm. Yeah.
All right, now, any questions? Because I mean, we've got to move on from that.
No, yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory.
But you see how sound is not passing through the breadboard. The sound is not passing from the microphone to the speaker.
It's right, it's current.
That's proportional to the sound waves that are
Yeah,
being picked
so
up.
the microphone seems like in that case the microphone has to match the speaker in a way.
Well, it's interesting because it's
Or
it's kind of the other way around. It's the speaker that's sort of mimicking the microphone.
right, right.
Um, and and I really want to talk about one thing real quick. I almost kind of lost my side here for a second, but like, oh yeah, because you mentioned free energy, and I'm so glad that you did, because you see this all ties in. It really does. Because one of my major breakthroughs was finally understanding how the Hoover Dam even works. How does the Hoover Dam generate electricity?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, there are two forms of free energy right now on the planet. Well, that's accessible on the planet. One of them, thankfully, is not on the planet, and that's the sun, but it's accessible. And I've got a few things here. What do we got here? This is pretty cool. I haven't used this yet. This is a big solar panel that spits out 5 volts.
Huh.
So like I could use this to power any of my 5-volt stuff. But what's cool is I've actually got a couple more, and the current draw is kind of a problem, but I can put them together and get 10 volts and be safe enough to get like 9-volt synthesizers going.
Oh, nice.
Free energy. Well, hey,
Yeah.
this cost me money, of course, but
Yeah, and that was the thing about see one of my things on the Moog rack is a
uh-huh.
Eurorack case. and I decided to get a 60 HP Eurorack case for, since I wasn't going to get a Mother 32, because I wasn't really interested in that. Um, but the whole idea around it was that I use a power bank, um, and this poly end anywhere module just allows the modular the row to be powered by a power bank. And I can power it by regular power banks, but that's when I started looking at those things like you've got right there, and that it's literally unlimited,
Yeah, it's a matter
no
of
matter where you are. Yeah.
it's a matter of how much current that your
Yeah.
devices draw. Is how long you can, work with them. Usually, these are better to charge power banks. So like
Yeah.
this power bank is beefy. These cost about $25. I did purchase one on Amazon and it was a dud. I sent it back and got a
Uh-huh.
replacement. You just got to test it, make sure it works. But it's a 4-port charging, and I mean it. I was powering 3 of my Roland boutiques off of this.
Yeah.
I want to guess it would go for maybe about 24 hours.
Uh-huh. There's so many on the market. I just have to mention for everybody out there, it's so easy to get burned.
It is, yeah. And I'm not
and
using those now.
yeah.
That's the other thing is it in the end it didn't solve my problems, which my problems were ground loops, and it didn't solve my ground loop issue. I had to go buy actual ground loop isolators, which I highly recommend though. They're great if you have any ground loop problems. You get them on Amazon for $10.
Every once in a while, which is frustrating because it's like I'm doing this the same as I did last time.
Yeah, that's another topic. Hopefully, but I need to do some more research on that myself. I've been studying that for a long time. But okay, cool. I hope that we got the the microphone to the speaker kind of thing out of the way. One more form of free energy, and that's using water, and that's pretty much gross overstatements here. But how the Hoover Dam works in a nutshell is the water that's falling from the dam rotates turbines or whatever,
Right.
like a windmill, right? And guess what's on that thing spinning? Magnets,
Yeah. Okay.
right? And they're spinning around what? Another magnetic field. Get it?
Okay. And so yeah, and
And that generates electricity.
mhm.
Major, massive electricity. Now
Yeah.
these turbines are like, huge. They're gigantic. And the amount of water that's falling to turn this stuff is like, it'd probably crush you if it landed on you. But yeah, it's the same. You see, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
All this was discovered by Michael Faraday. I mean, Tesla's great. Don't get me wrong, but like there's so many like other Tesla stands on the shoulder of many giants.
Yeah,
before
yeah.
them.
He used magnets too, and for a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean that's what I'm trying to say is it's like once you wrap your head and understand that magnetism is really kind of the major force, you start to understand. Okay.
Yeah, no,
That's
no.
why-
I don't put anybody on a pedestal, and that's one of my big beefs in life.
Oh, I would definitely put Tesla on a pedestal. I'm joking.
Yeah, but I still think that I'm potentially better than all of them. So
Okay, there you go. There you
No.
go. I got to say a quick Edison story because people give Edison a lot of flack. And here's
Uh-huh.
the thing: I wasn't there. I don't know those guys. I don't know who anything. But the thing about Tesla is that he was like I'm sorry, Edison. In Edison's early days, he was like a young Tesla. It's really bizarre. Like, he actually was beaten up by people working for the gas company because they were back in those days. We used gas lights to light the streets at nighttime.
hmm
What Edison was doing was a serious economical burden upon the people that already had this industry.
yeah,
That's
kind
what
of
I'm
like
trying to say.
cars now.
Yeah, totally. So he had to he basically had to do his experiments in the back of a train car, and they threw him out of a train car when they found out what he was doing, and
Mhm.
that's why he went deaf. And so I mean, you kind of look at Edison. I mean, you realize that he had a hard life, and on top of all of this, he died poor. All of these people died poor. That's one of the most important things to learn. I mean, I don't think Faraday did, but most of them, like a lot of the players,
Well-
but the inventors and the actual, the dreamers,
Yep.
yeah,
That it's
They lost all
it's
their
just
money.
the way it's just the way it's always been.
Yeah. Yeah.
that so often the people who do the work are the ones that are going to be taken advantage of by those who can bring it to some sort of
Yeah.
whatever.
I hate to, but
Yeah.
that is kind of, I mean, like all of this is really, really related.
Microsoft. Anyway.
Oh boy, don't get me started on that.
No,
I'm
let's
an
not.
open source fanatic.
Yeah. But anyway.
Um, okay, but
Um,
yeah, so now I think we can start talking about oscillators actually.
uh-huh.
Now that we've laid, and everybody, we need to take like a break or something. Where are we at, by
Everybody's
the
like,
way?
have we figured out oscillators yet?
Not until the end. Not until the end.
I have all the time in the world, but
Okay,
so.
because really, if you think about it, right, we've already described an oscillator,
Uh-huh.
and that's just, I mean, the waveform itself that the microphone picked up and transduced into the current and sent across the wire, we amplified and everything. I mean, it's not in essence a true oscillator, but it is oscillations.
No, wait. So, but see, I don't get that. Like, what was an
Okay,
oscillator in there?
well, okay, like if you record your voice into something like Audacity, right,
Uh-huh.
and you get a waveform, it's not
Okay,
going to be
so yeah.
it's not going to be a perfect sine wave
So
like
your
what I'm
voice
pointing
is
at.
your voice can generate oscillation,
Of
and
course.
therefore,
Of course, yeah. I mean, when we sing, right? When we can produce a tone anytime we want to.
okay, now that's what I wasn't thinking
Yeah.
about.
And
I'm
yeah,
thi-
you get to the
okay.
science of the meat flaps that are actually causing that to happen. And what's interesting is that what I've learned is that when you sing falsetto,
Mhm.
it's like when you sing regular, it's like walking, and when you sing falsetto, it's like sprinting, like fast, really
Yeah.
really fast.
Yeah. That's
And
that's why it's so hard
to
to
control,
well to get to where you can smooth out to where there's no gap in between.
when you switch back and forth, yes,
Mhm.
yes, definitely,
That's
definitely.
I've always been a singer, and so I've it's always kind of like struggled with that, and that's everybody struggle. Singers struggle with that to the point where I mean you have to physically train your vocal cords to get there and
Yeah.
stay there,
You can
and
think of it.
if you don't, then you get out of it.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately, right? I mean, you have to have a very unique sounding voice. I mean, at the end of the day, your voice has to be pleasing. And not to everybody. Just to enough, maybe the majority, maybe not even, the minority really at that point. But sometimes, I mean, like take Bob Dylan or Tom Petty, had a really good friend of mine who like could not stand the way that those guys sang. And or like Janis Joplin, and
Uh huh.
I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Those are the best singers in my opinion. Those are the people that have unique voices
Uh huh.
that like to replicate them. Wow, you got to really work hard to replicate those voices.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think it's in the ear of the beholder. Definitely, how whether you even want nice,
And
gentle, mellow, and consider that good singing, or something the opposite. You know.
and yeah, that is the huge rub that prevents a lot of education within music is the
Yeah,
rejection of just what you don't like.
because
And
there's legit singing, and legit singing is not actually like when you say, it might seem like an arrogant thing to say, but this is what's taught in school. Legit singing is an actual type of singing. That goes into the school of opera and whatnot.
right,
Um,
which
and it's a
and
rule set pretty much that you have to do things with your voice that open it up in a way that's to that
yes,
philosophy.
I want to look this up now. It's what's it called? The Sopranos Format and the something else. There's soprano and tenor.
So like one of the ideas is like that when you say me, you're going me, you're closing off so much. So you shape everything from your mouth all the way down
Not
to
going to
your
find it.
diaphragm and everything to go meh, and you're actually going meh, and you're not even really saying me, and the the goal is to be saying me, but not really be saying me,
Did okay.
stuff
I've
like
got
that.
this book. This book is very hard to read, and I actually stopped reading it today. I got to like about yay far, and I just said, okay, I
Hmm.
give up. I'm, Anymore, I'm going to go back and start over and read again because like the last final chapters are just so mathematical.
Uh,
And just so like okay, like I mean,
it,
it's almost like everything is just trying to prepare you for the last like 4 chapters.
it's one of those things I'd have to read the paragraph 5 times.
Well, but there's a lot of, I mean, if you can get past, like, if you can just kind of keep reading, without, like, and accept your brain melting, out of your ears, there's a lot of really great little tidbits. This is a book that second time I'm going to go through, I'm going to start highlighting, like, all the really important stuff.
Uh-huh.
And, comprising some of this information, because one of the things that this guy talks about is both in opera, sopranos and tenors each have a different way of singing. We're like the masters of those two classes. And it's weird because usually, like, the sopranos are usually female in this particular case, and the tenors are male. And I think there's actually is there's a reason for this, is because of the physical differences between what's going on inside of here. Just subtle, tiny differences. And talked about before the coupling, right, between the mouthpiece and the mouth and the chamber of an instrument like that.
Yeah.
Well, there's this weird thing going on with, I think it's in the tenor, and I think it might be the tenor format is what it's called. You have to, the soprano was something else, I can't remember. But this one, it's like you have to like develop the muscles in a way that does some kind of weird impedance between these two portions of your physical parts inside your throat.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah. Well,
What?
I've always kind of like had explained, that there's a reed. Your vocal cords are a reed, kind of like a clarinet.
They can be,
Anyway.
yeah. Yeah, they're like they're meat flap reeds. There's like 2 of them or something.
Yeah. But John Richardson mentioned earlier that I should look up the papers on the original vocoder.
Oh, I love vocoders. I love vocoders. Man, I'm a vocoder sucker. Yeah, there's a guy named Julian Lett on YouTube, and most of these guys that do electronics on YouTube, they definitely they're electrical engineers.
Mm-hmm.
So for them, synthesis, music, electronic music through synthesis and that kind of stuff, that's just like one little Venn diagram of the many things that they delve into. So if I mention some of these folks, it's like you've got to go looking through their videos to find the things that you want to find.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, like Gadget Reboot is another one, who will do some cool audio stuff. But Julian Lett with a J, he is actually building a vocoder right now.
Okay.
And he's off and on, working on some of it. And he's more interested though in the design aspects of putting the circuits together and making things modular than actually just, for him it's like, oh yeah, I can build a vocoder, that's no big deal. So getting, like I said, like, getting the value out of this stuff, it's kind of, you have to go hunting and digging and searching to find what you're really looking for.
Yeah, I unfortunately I have a vocoder on my RC505. I don't know if anyone will ever be able to help me with this, but I put MIDI into it and play and have the notes down, but it doesn't seem to come out right. I don't know why. If I have it set on vocoder, it's like it should work, but it's like a pedal. It's like a vocoder pedal. It works like that. I don't know.
Normally, you have to have an oscillation going through,
Yeah.
and then your voice is going to go additionally with whatever, like, so.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
So I have the audio in, and then I'm trying to
the audio in for your voice.
Yeah.
Okay, but
I'm
what about what's oscillating
singing.
it though? Do you have a second audio in? Or is there something internal to that pedal that's going to...
Well, I have the MIDI keyboard into.
Okay, yeah. So if you play the keys and you speak into it, you should hear something.
Yeah. But I just hear my voice instead, and
okay.
I don't know. I don't know why, but for that reason, I definitely have always been interested in all the vocoders that have been coming out, and or throughout history. But of course, I'm not going to be able to afford that reissue of the Moog one or anything. But
yeah, I wish I could too. In the meantime, you can just get one of these or mini Chaos pads.
Yeah. Or something software.
You know what? Sweetwater had that $5,000 giveaway for Christmas. You remember that? Like you put like $5,000 in your on your wish list, and I guess somebody won.
Oh, cool.
That's what I put
Yeah.
in my wish list
Yeah.
was a $5,000 Moog vocoder.
Uh-huh.
There's a company in Italy. Now, of course, this was all pre-pandemic news, so who knows what's going on now. But there's a company in Italy. I don't think it's ARP. It might be ARP. They start with an A. The name. They're building a vocoder that's every bit as good as the Moog, and it's like $3,000.
Mm.
And all things
Yeah.
equal, I kind
You'd
of
think you
would rather have
could,
that one.
right?
Well, I don't know. I don't know why there's
And not be
you
just
know.
you couldn't maybe and have it be just like it, of course. Like you said, you have to get all those
That
little parts have to be, but
that's weird because if anything, I would think that the Italian one would cost more. And again, this is pre-pandemic, so the prices may have changed. I have no idea. Who has one of the Moog vocoders, by the way? I mean, I haven't looked on YouTube to see if they're out or anything. But
I haven't looked into it that much. Another thing is everybody loves the Micro Freak, and
oh yeah,
it's got that. It's got the thing is like I would, even though I would never get it, be, because it's not because
you
I
should
it's
get a
like
Micro Freak. I don't, me, I don't like to tell the people what to get, but it's like
well
if you could find one for $200, that's a
Yeah.
no-brainer.
yeah, and because it already has the polyphonic Platts system in it, and then it's
I
got
mean,
the BIA, and it's got all the make noise stuff in it now too. And it's only what $300 around there or something like that. So
I mean, that's the reason to get it alone right here. It's got a speak and spell in it.
yeah, just last night I was using it to just to say the word in an appropriate word, you know, like sequencer, like for short, sex,
Yeah.
But no, but I have this really raunchy song coming out. I'll put it out next week. No, maybe I'll put that since I mentioned it. It's gonna have to be the next one I put out. But I've
Oh, I
already
look forward
mastered
to
it
it.
and I'm ready to upload it. So I'll do that like probably later today. But it's just a fun joke. But basically the idea is I'm using one Platts to make some interesting undulating sounds, and I'm using another Platts to just say the word every once in a while. And that was the thing about triggering it. I'm all like, oh. And then originally it'd be like I would unplug it and it would say the word Xerox, even though it's six. It's like 4, 5, 6,
okay.
7, 8, 9. But I put it down low enough that it says Xerox.
That's funny. I want to hear. That's okay. I look forward to hearing this one.
I
I look forward to
love
hearing all your
that.
jams, but this is yeah.
But yeah, that's another reason to pick up the Micro Freak for people who aren't going to get into it, or modulars too much of a head trip for you right now, or something like that.
The capacitive touch keyboard is awesome. It really is. I had a friend of mine who was over here like, smashing down on. I was just kind of nervous, like Monka S, looking at him, and then finally he kind of figured out, oh, that's really responsive. Like, yeah, thanks. And but I think the reason why you might find one for sale on Reverb for $200 is because someone bought it and they don't have effects. And you're like, oh, does it come with effects? And you're it's not an all-in-one box. If you've got effects, it sounds great. It does. I've got a video on YouTube talking about this already.
Mm-hmm.
But
That's why I'm really into the
sound.
Dreadbox Typhoon, because like
I would
my
get one of those if I
my
didn't
mono
move.
station has always been sitting here. It's just like the perfect thing, except without for a bass synth, except without effects, and the effects on that is not only
Yes.
on there, but it's a good way and decent, like UI wise. It's a way that I would dig.
You see that, in my opinion, real quick aside, what we're looking at here? It's 10 minutes because I'm going to answer the question what an oscillator here is here now.
Okay.
It's nice to kind of like take a break though because this is
do you
very
have
heavy
to
stuff.
do you have to you gotta get going and be somewhere at a certain point?
No, I've got another hour. I've got as much time as you want.
Okay.
Really.
Okay. Cool.
But again, I don't want to bore people to tears
Right.
either. What was I talking about before I'm going to?
It was the Micro Freak, the
Yeah.
and then.
Oh well. Darn.
I'm sorry. That's
Old
my
brain. It was an aside talking about some other synthesizer, and I don't even
Help us
remember.
out, chat.
What was Haze talking about? Maybe I really need to read chat.
Oh yeah, we were talking about onboard
keep up
effects.
with- Oh yeah, yes,
And then I
onboard
said the
effects.
typhone. But
Right,
yeah.
right, right. Thank you very much. Because I'm still waiting for my S 2400 with the Isla Instruments S2400, which is the EMU SP 1200 clone. The SP 1200 was the old school uh, sampler that, like, alongside with the Akai, were really the foundations for hip hop essentially.
Hmm.
And Brad over at Isla Instruments is making a fantastic sampler. I mean, this is a fantastic device. It is a tank. There's a video of him picking it up over his head and dropping it to the ground. Yeah, I mean, he's serious.
No,
And
I agree. It's amazing. My only questions is just like, all right,
it's just
hoping that that maybe it could be something that could be mass marketed to people, and like there could be a lot out there and sold to a lot of people, but maybe not because it's just so. Uh, it's a small boutique company, and whatnot,
that,
and the people looking for something like that is not everybody, but if it could be, that is such a it has what a drum machine needs, in my opinion.
yes. But at the end of the day, I'm going to say it, it's just a sampler.
Uh-huh.
It's just a sampler, folks.
Right. It's the same thing with the circuit rhythm, though, is like it's going to be just a sampler with just samples, and it's the same thing. It's like they're trying to create, like, all right, if you want any kind of drum sounds, there's not going to be anything. You can't be able to say, well, but it's not going to be able to have this for me. If it's a sample based thing, it's gonna cover what you need covered in sounds. The only thing it's not gonna do is satisfy you if you particularly want to do it through synthesis or something like that, which I would like. The model cycles is amazing, and that's why I like the idea of that. But, but anyway.
Um, for me, my personal preference is I like kind of dedicated function devices.
Uh-huh.
Kind of, it does one thing and it does it really, really, really damn good. Um, what the reason why I bring up the S2400 is because looking like I see a lot of people on the forum, and one of the biggest requests you get from people who are probably not even going to buy the thing in the first place, and Brad knows this, I know he does, is they ask, "Oh, I want onboard effects. When is the firmware update going to have onboard effects?" And Brad's like, yeah, I might, because we're working with DSP, and because the foundation of the firmware and the software that he's using for this, he's like, yeah, my
Mm-hmm.
guy might be able to add some reverb and some delays, and yeah, that's okay and everything. But they're not going to be spectacular.
Okay.
They're
Yeah,
just
well,
they're
in a
gonna
market sense, it would make sense that people would really. It's digital, so why not, right?
see exactly, and it's like, dude, this is a premium piece of hardware. Why would you spend this kind of money on a sampler and not already have good effects to go along with it? What kind of studio are you running? Now, I hate to be
Hmm.
that guy right now, but I mean, I'm just like, I'm going to be that guy right now.
Well, that's the truth about a person who asks that question is doing so in this sort of philosophical way about things that they don't have yet and they haven't worked with yet. And that's why you'd ask a certain question. I know because that's what I've been spending the last 4 years. Like I started out asking all of these questions that were there isn't a good answer for it because it was the wrong question all the time. Like, and then I got to be less and less of doing that. You know.
Well, my only contention is like there's a difference between like, hey, it's gonna have onboard effects, and then being like, well, I'm not gonna buy it if it doesn't have onboard effects.
Right. There's a
There's a
difference. Yeah.
difference, yeah. And that my contention is with the latter, not the former.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, I get it. I do all the time. It's something that I want to kind of get into here when I hear the term. It's like, wow, that oscillator is fat. That
Yeah.
oscillator sounds thick. What? What are you talking about? And you mean, what? What are you talking about? We'll get to that, hopefully. No,
Yeah.
there's a few breakthroughs that can be had in this. And what I think is really great is that it will allow you to cut through the marketing
Uh
jargon
huh. Yeah.
a lot better. Speaking of which, a
Well,
book.
get to a synth is a synth. You know.
Oh, well, yes, we can. This is a book that everybody should buy.
Sound
This is the
reinforcement.
Yamaha Sound Reinforcement Handbook, and you can get it for under 20 bucks. That dust, sorry. You get it for under 20 bucks, and it's from the late 80s, and it will teach you everything you need to know that you're not going to learn from just using computers. Even if you don't have the hardware, this will give you the foundation to understand the hardware, so that when you use the VST versions of it, you have a lot better understanding and so forth.
It's like the secret book.
Um, it's a secret book. It's one secret book. I've got a bunch of secret books. What I love about this one is it's very comprehensive, and it is the kind of book where you're gonna read it. It's gonna take you have to read over several times for it to really sink in, unless you're just an IQ of 300. But I mean, just like the
Yeah,
first
I feel.
chapters talking about decibels, understanding like what the different decibels, how to determine headroom,
Uh huh.
and all of these things, which leads into then like compression and amplification. It's a much better way to get the fundamentals inside of you going forward.
Yeah, that's what I think about like that as a contrast to going on YouTube and hearing different people with opinions who are producers talk about compression and whatnot, and it's like, okay, you guys, and you just know if you watch enough of it that there's just something inherently wrong with it until you do something aside and go like, all right, this is the boring dry stuff, and get through that, and then you're like, okay, and that's where you really learn it. I'm doing the same thing with this music copyright book that's kind of old. I think is from the 90s, but it's huge, and it just takes it's a slow read. But,
Yeah, I took copyright law in the '90s. It was not a fun class.
but you know what? It's so exciting at the same time. What I've
Yeah,
learned
it can
in the
be.
last just week, I'm like,
Maybe I should
I'm
have been a
so
lawyer.
powerful now, knowing how freakishly many licenses there are out there for you to deal with, in the
Yeah.
first place. And that's why none of us are going to deal with it, and that's why it's expensive to go even hire somebody to deal with it.
Oh,
Um,
most definitely, most definitely, most
it's
definitely.
crazy
But
stuff. But
wow,
anyway,
what
yeah,
another
back.
topic. And I will say this: I am not an expert on business aspects of
Hmm.
the recording industry. That's for darn sure.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just eye opening. Just like that's a whole realm that I'm just like scratching the surface of. And like, oh my gosh, people
if
know a
it's
lot,
if it's
and
any
I don't know
consolation, after I received my degree in audio engineering,
anything.
which at the time was called recording industry, which at the time was called recording industry management, actually, which was very bizarre. The whole program was, it was a two-part program. One was business focused and one was technical focused.
Mm.
And I did the technical side. After I got into there, and all the teachers were looking at us, going, "Run, screaming, don't look back,
Hmm.
don't do this. This is a horrible job." And I just kind of,
That was me in programming, but
well,
yeah.
that's like after that, I got into computer science.
Uh,
It
that's
didn't. I
cool.
mean, the way it worked out is real quick. Is I took an elective course when I was studying audio engineering, and that elective course was computer animation.
Hmm.
And it was a very hard class to get into because everybody wanted to do it. You had to really prove
Yeah.
to the teacher that no, I'm not just some roadie that's gonna like come in here stoned all the time and fail your class or whatever. Um, and so I took like 3 classes with this guy. It was great. And so he liked me. When I couldn't figure out what I was going to do with my degree, and after about half a year graduating, I went back to this professor and asked to say, hey, what am I going to do? He said and oh no, I'm sorry. But really, what I had to do was that student loans were coming around, and I had to defer my student loans. So I decided to go back to school. That was a way to defer your loans.
Hmm.
And so, since I was going back to school, I figured, okay, well, at least I should, be productive if I'm going to do this, because I'm going to basically defer my loans by taking out more loans. Doesn't make sense. And I talked to this professor, and he said, okay, well, you like computers, right? I said, yeah. So why don't you take some art classes and take a couple intro computer science classes? I said, hey, that's a great idea. Man, that was the best semester of my life. That was so much fun.
Hmm.
And the computer science stuck, thankfully. This is way too long of a story, but
Oh, that's good. No, that's
that's
cool.
basically, yeah,
You don't
the
even know
computer
how
science
much it.
stuck. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
You don't even know how much that it resonates with me. I'm similar. I did a computer animation getting into college myself, starting out college, and then went the route of, oh my gosh, this is too tedious. I want to just write the story, and so I got into script writing and creative writing, and went a very more like you would think, easy lazy route, but
Well,
but
yeah, I've
it
never.
was the stuff that was easy to me to actually finish something instead of like you do this little snippet of something in animation and it takes a little tiniest thing takes 12 hours
Hours
to
to render.
render.
Of course, now it doesn't, but back then it took forever.
So I yeah that's what I just it was the tedium of all of it.
Uh,
Same thing with programming, but
what I
yeah.
want to do
So
with that stuff now, though, with the 3D animation, is I want to use that to learn CAD, so I can actually start designing, PCBs that look like this
uh-huh.
with the computer. But flash forward or whatever. Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, I've never written a story before, so that's
Uh-huh.
that's a lot of problems to solve if you think about writing a story. It's a lot of problems to
It
solve.
actually to be good
You've got to create
at
problems to
telling
solve.
story is an amazing like organized
Yeah,
feat that you learn how to do, and it's really cool. But
yeah. I'm
that's an
terrible at it right now.
um but anyway, you but see now I'm like I could be inspired because of this stuff to now look into electronics again,
Oh yeah.
uh,
Well,
and all that stuff.
to me, like modular was just a big tease for me. Like if I'd gotten into modular, that was not going to satisfy my itch. It
Hmm.
wasn't. It was just like I had too many questions. I was like, well, why is it called voltage controlled this, voltage controlled that? Why is it not current? That's a great question in my opinion. And well, the answer is because well, we don't need to use current for that. We can use voltage, and current is very, very powerful in the sense that it's probably going to generate a lot of heat and be wasteful.
Hmm.
You want to reserve power for robots, for robotic things. And voltage, what I like to say is that voltage can be used for communication. That's a broad
Oh.
statement. But communication
Oh.
is like, what kind of communication? All kinds of communication.
Okay. Oh my goodness. I just got this notification.
Uh-oh. Uh-huh.
Um, that Shadow Bagel underscore
Uh-huh.
on Twitch has donated $5,000 with the message "Enjoy the money, bro."
To you?
Um, I think so, and I'm
That
not
is
sure.
amazing. Go
I
buy a
wasn't sure
vocoder.
whether I had those
What?
options going in Twitch or not because I hadn't got an on-screen donation while I had been streaming so far. I just got started with that stuff over there on.
That is amazing,
But
dude.
yeah, over there on my Mellow Llama channel, I'm also restreaming this on Twitch and on YouTube,
Well, what do you...
and you know what I really appreciate that, and the thing if it goes through, if not, don't yeah. No, nobody worry about doing that sort of thing here but if you do, it'll go to great use because we're building something really important here. But anyway,
That's absolutely amazing.
yeah,
But this, of course, now is the bad news, folks, is that Mr. Basic no longer needs to know what an oscillator is.
it's not necessary. No, no, but the point of this is that we all need to know what an oscillator is because none of us we all can get a million different explanations of such, and I have, and that's why I'm so confused. It's not
Gotcha.
that I haven't heard it before. But the thing is, physically, when it comes down to not an IC, but the breadboard, more basic,
Oh,
like
aha. I'm
like
gonna have to correct that, but go ahead. Go ahead.
uh, yeah,
Keep going. No, go ahead. Go ahead though. Go ahead.
Well, so um, so is it um just the waveform. Okay, so yeah. So what is it physically?
Okay,
Not an IC when it's an IC, or both. If that wouldn't take too long, I guess.
gotcha. Okay, so there are many, many, many ways to create an electronic circuit that creates an oscillation.
Uh huh.
That was a horrible way for me to say that, but you see what I'm trying to say. Okay. Um,
There are many
the
ways.
Yeah. Did you see my video on the what's called the Isaki oscillator? And it's not really what it's called, but you know,
I don't remember at the moment.
that's what we call it. That
Okay.
is one of the first videos that I made, and I made that video. When I made that video, I had no clue about hardly any of the stuff right now.
Well, the thing is, I remember watching it, but I certainly don't remember. Like,
Okay,
I didn't get what was going on.
the thing
Completely.
to do, really, my video is meant to be a supplementary video after you've watched other videos on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
Now, Look Mom No Computer's got one, by the way. You should definitely start with him.
Yeah,
Always start with Sam,
I love how he explains things
because
while he's building. Yeah.
he's coming always from the viewpoint of just we're gonna have fun and we're gonna make a bunch of noise,
Hmm.
and that's a great starting point.
And I was kind of fearless in chat. I used to talk to him
Awesome.
quite a bit because he wasn't quite as popular as now. You know.
Yeah, I remember
Just
like
like
I
the
think
other-
when he had like 2,000 subscribers or something on YouTube.
Something like that, yeah.
Like boom. And okay, so the Isaki oscillator, and I've got some over here somewhere. Well, they're not the oscillators themselves. Yeah, hang on a second. I can show you really quickly. I think I can grab one here. Well, nope. None of these are that. Yeah, here we go. I found one. I'm trying to grab a transistor, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff in the way. What like becomes a rat's nest. Okay, now how well can we see this? I'm not sure, but this is just a little silicon transistor.
Hmm.
And you know, back in the 90s, I actually thought that we developed this technology from the Roswell crash, the UFOs and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Because I was like, man, this is like some serious, serious crazy stuff that we've come up with. But no, I'll tell you right here and right now, I was completely wrong. No alien technology needed for this stuff. We have been, humans that is, we've been working on this for like 200 years. Really, the concepts that led to this. We've been working on them for a long time.
Hmm.
And it took a lot of people to get to the point where this was developed.
Right.
All right, so what's interesting about this is a transistor is a three-leg component. It's got three
Uh-huh.
things, right? They're inputs, outputs, whatever.
And a ground.
What's that?
And a ground, right?
No.
Oh.
Okay, emitter base collector, if you want to get technical. Unless
Okay.
it's a MOSFET, then it's drain, source, and what's the other one? Gate. We like you know, that's okay though. I mean, like it's keep throwing these things because
Hmm.
the important thing is it's like, you know, you don't know you're wrong, and you're not wrong, but or even incorrect, but kind of on the wrong path. until
That's
you
why
say
I
like
don't
that.
mind sounding stupid.
Thank you very
Because
much.
that's
Yeah,
that's
mean,
how I
you've
get
got
it
to-
out of you is to tell you what I don't know.
Exactly. What I've done is I've taken the middle leg, which
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty sure is the base on this transistor. They're not always the same in all transistors. It's just the way it goes. Like sometimes most often the base is the middle one, not always. I'm pretty sure this one is because I've got it flipped up and over here. Now what Sam did in his video, look Mom No Computer, is, and it's really funny how he does it. You know, he cuts the middle leg off and he's got like a picture of the transistor going, "Oh no," you know. And but what I discovered is that like, well, first of all, I said, well, I'm not going to cut it off because I'm like cheap and I want to reuse this thing. I'll just bend it back down. So I bent it up like a little antenna.
Mm.
Now, what's really cool is that if you've got about 18 volts, a capacitor, and this transistor, that's all you need to create a ramp, a sawtooth. Boom, you've got yourself an acid oscillator.
Uh-huh.
You got yourself, seriously, you got yourself and Here's what I discovered is that some transistors produce a ramp up and others produce a ramp down.
Okay.
I don't know why. I haven't, looked into that anymore. But the way that this works is Isaki is a Japanese engineer who discovered what's called the reverse breakdown avalanche. I don't want to get into the details. This is just the start, okay? Unfortunately, see, that's the thing. This is the simplest oscillator you can build, but to understand how it works, unfortunately, is one of the most complicated to try to understand. And because of the nature of this thing, it's pushing current back and forth. And the capacitor acts as two things. Really, for the most part, what it does is it acts as like a delay mechanism. Now we got to come back over here to the sine wave. I wish I could get the screen bigger over here, unfortunately.
Oh, I forget. I didn't mention yet. 256K Labs is here,
Hello.
and yeah,
Okay.
and he's the guy who made my matrix mixer over here.
Nice. Good work,
And
sir.
and yeah, and it's amazing. It's really, really well built, and he gets back into the game, which he may be by now. I don't know if you can confirm or deny, but he may be slowly getting back into the game at some point. But he has a lot of other things going on in his life as well, and so as most of us are, he's fighting with, how much am I going to focus on modular in my life at this point, or not, and that sort of thing. But anyway,
I hope
go
it
on.
all works out for you.
Yeah.
Frequency.
Hmm.
The capacitor determines the frequency of the oscillator. Can you see that?
Here.
How can I explain that to you?
Now, the problem is, for until next time that I figure it out, I'm gonna have to. I am muted when I put you on full screen, but I want to put you on full screen anyway, and so
Oh, I see. Okay.
and so
Well,
I'll
you
do
don't
that
have
real
to,
quick,
I don't think.
just for a second.
Okay. But the capacitor determines the frequency, which basically is how close each of these peaks and troughs are together. Now, I can easily change the frequency here, lower it with my function generator. And you can imagine, like Mr. Basic was talking about before, that that module that allows you to change the capacitors. Well, this is what's going on in a sense. Now, what I'm doing is just a representation of what would happen by changing capacitors in an analog oscillator. This is a digital oscillator. It's a whole nother story. But basically what you can do is you can have like one capacitor, and then you could have a potentiometer, a variable resistor, that works in the range around that one capacitor. And this will allow you to work, maybe 10 hertz or so, maybe 1 hertz, what am I trying to say? 1,000 hertz to 5,000 hertz. But that's the extent of the range. And if you want to go any further, any lower or higher in frequency, you've got to use a different capacitor. Boom, swap out something else. Let me see if I can show you a function generator that I built a long time ago. It was one of the first ones that I built, and the reason why I built it was just to learn how to build a function generator. Here it is. Okay. And yeah, you can see it fairly well, I guess. This is one of the first circuits that I built. Little handheld. Actually, it works this way, I think. No, yeah, it's like that. Battery clip, 9-volt battery, and it's just on a circuit board like a pocket operator. Hard to see. Over here are 4 capacitors. I don't know that you can see them very well, but right here under my finger,
Okay.
there are 3 green ones and then a little orange-yellow one. And then I've got a dip switch, which is not being used digitally. It's just a 4 switch. It's just 4 switches. And whichever ones are up puts that capacitor into the path. So this is how I can switch octave ranges, essentially. I hope that makes sense. What I'm getting at is that with a lot of these analog oscillators, you have a very limited range. a frequency that you can work with, that it can produce. And the
Okay.
way to get past that limitation is to introduce more capacitors into the circuit. And the only way to do that is to somehow switch them in to the circuit. And the way I'm doing it is a very crude, primitive way where you literally have to have, like, very tiny fingers and hit this one little switch and not the other ones. And of course, in the process of changing it, you're going to hear clipping and whatever.
That reminds me of my, uh, what is it? The Gecko. The Gecko loop synth.
Okay. Yeah,
Have you?
I didn't know you had one.
Yeah, I actually got it in a giveaway.
Cool.
I won it, but oh, I don't have it with, but yeah, it has this different spots where you touch across the points, but in particular, yeah, when you touch the two that are next to each other, both at the same time, it's different than just touching one or touching the other, and it makes the bridge between them. It makes a different sort of effect. I would say sound, but it has different. They have different functions to them based on the algorithm that you choose on the device.
Yeah, without knowing the circuit, I can't really compare that to what we're talking about here. Like, I mean, I could envision something like that where,
Well, it's basically they're opening it up to the to being circuit bent without you having to circuit bend it.
I see.
Pretty much.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha.
Just keep it open architecture so that you can touch some of the points and make different connections yourself.
Gotcha. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're going to see a lot more of that, I think, in the future, which is kind of cool. Which, a lot of things like the castle has these little holes, where you can use like a little jumper wire. This is one of the first. I got this, long time ago, and it came with these jumper wires.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what the heck are these things? And and I thought that, where am I going to find cables like this at? Well, it turns out, man, that these are like a dime a dozen with every electronic starter kit that you could ever find. And what else is cool is that what these little holes that plug in, these are just standard little female header rows, which I've got a whole bunch of them down here somewhere. Yeah, like bags of them right here. And male and female for that matter. Anyways, I'm getting off the beaten path, but just things that, once you start opening, let me back up a little bit. See, one of the problems that I'm having with talking about this stuff, and I could, when I'm discussing the Osaki oscillator, is that, I have to teach you how to read a schematic at some point, right? Well, I don't have to teach you, but you have to teach yourself how to read a schematic. And I could show you the schematic, but it's probably just going to open up more questions than it's going to have answers.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of figured, well, let's just, we'll just talk about the components and not worry about how they're connected, really. That's what's really kind of important. But the Osaki oscillator is just, like I said, it's one of the most simplest ones. What we get into later is really what it takes is you need like 2 transistors to really get a true oscillator going.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great video series out there. Colin, and I can't think of Colin Cunningham, that's his name. And he put these videos out on YouTube like 10, 12 years ago with the Make community as his sponsor. And they're called Colin's Lab. And they're here on YouTube, and they're great. I think y'all should watch them.
Now that's the stuff I've watched, but not like to now. It's like I think back, all right, I didn't absorb it.
Well,
somehow.
Yeah, it's hard to absorb until you have a
But I'm
place
sure
to
I
put
did.
that information.
But it's a slow
Yes.
going. I think.
You plant seeds is what you do. It's great. The video of interest that he did, it's so funny. The video talks about breadboards. Why are they called breadboards? Like, well, back in the day, they used breadboards, and they would just nails into the breadboard and use wire wrapping techniques.
Yeah.
So he builds a circuit using wire wrapping on a breadboard, and the circuit that he builds is an oscillator.
Yeah.
But it blinks an LED or 2 LEDs, I think. Now,
yeah, I saw that one.
Here's where it gets really fun. That's the same thing, all right? Whether or not you blink LEDs or you produce a sound. Wait, a sound. What are we talking about here? We're producing something that's going to produce a sound, right?
Right. But
It's
is
the
it
same
just
thing.
a click? Does an oscillator only ever give you a click at a certain pace?
Okay, a square wave might, right?
But then
It tries to be, like a straight on or straight off. It's got like that
but so
90
what's the
degree
most
slope.
natural thing for an oscillator? It
Really,
depends on what kind of oscillator then, right?
probably the most natural thing is a sine wave.
But why then is it so hard to get a sine wave? Why do you have to do so many complex things and it doesn't turn out?
Um, okay, well, you really don't have to do so
Oh,
many
okay.
complex things. Now, let me back up for a second. Perhaps a square wave is probably the easiest to produce. It probably is. Yeah, yeah, the square wave is because the two transistor circuit produces a square wave. And, you know, square waves are great actually because when you run those through a filter, you get all kinds of harmonic joyness happening.
Yeah, and then you can make a sine wave by using a filter on the pulse
Exactly.
wave. Yeah.
And that is generally what we do when we like as a builder, like a fledgling engineer, that is usually our first
Yeah.
sine wave circuit is one that takes a square wave and filters it into, or maybe we'll, better yet, if we can produce a triangle wave, we could filter that and it's going to look a whole lot more like a sine wave.
Okay.
Um, Now, I can't really get it, like I'd have to study it up myself and I'd have to, but I kind of am getting, understanding like how the two transistor circuit, basically what it's doing is it's bouncing back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it requires power though to do it, but it's really wild. It's a self-perpetuating type kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, and so that's why I was thinking it produces a click, which in turn is a square wave.
Yes. And if you run that through a speaker, yeah, you're going to get a clicking noise. And in fact, it's very interesting at this point because you see, I don't want to get too complicated here. I don't want to get, lose you right now, but there is a subtle difference between like DC that looks like AC and actual AC. And that's weird.
Okay.
Because think about an LFO. An LFO is spitting out DC, but it's a sine wave. It's not alternating current. It's weird. It's a little weird, and that may be getting a little bit off the beaten path there. But like I need to talk a little bit about that at least. Um,
That's cool.
Now, yeah. So like what I would have to do at this point, of course, is just start getting out like circuits that actually like with op amps. I don't want to talk too
Mm-hmm.
much
Yeah,
about
and
op
I
amps.
remember you talking about I've talked to you about that before, and you were talking about op amps and showing them on your channel as you were
Yes.
making it.
It turns out, well, all kinds of things, but mainly in the process of learning how to amplify a signal. Because once again, going back quickly, a little recap with the microphone and the speaker. Right in between here, we've got to amplify things, or it just doesn't really work. You kind of you can hear it, but it's very very faint. And everybody knows about the strings and the tin cans, right?
Well,
That works.
depending on.
That works too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so amplification has been something that if you think it's hard to understand how amplification works, just remember, I mean, decades and decades of people, of man hours, women hours, working on this problem, solving it.
Uh-huh.
Now then, so in part of the process of solving the problem of amplification, our what do you call them? Our discoverers or whatever, our research people, they produced all kinds of oscillations erroneously, unwantingly.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was to prevent these oscillations. So what I'm getting
Right.
at is it
Yeah.
turns out that okay, well, if you want to, you can use the amplification process in a weird way to just actually produce an oscillation, which is an actual tone, if it's in the audible range.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you were mentioning before, actually before the stream, we were sort of mentioned it about how like it's the backup any backup energy that can't go through because of some sort of because of resistance, because the resistance doesn't match up. There's too much resistance. You might, if you've got some kind of backlog, kind of like in a river where it's bubbles up behind,
Hmm.
then that's your oscillation or something
No,
like that. Or
no, no. That
creates an
would just be potential difference,
okay.
is what that would be.
Yeah.
The oscillation would be like the water hitting a windmill and causing the windmill to spin,
Okay. Yeah.
and then the oscillation in that case would be like where the two magnets meet
Mm-hmm.
and they cause a current to do its thing.
Yeah. So I guess we were
And
more
it's
talking about
periodic.
impedance when we were talking about that other thing. So
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, impedance is one of those things where it's like, you hear that word all the time. Oh, well, yeah, that's because of high impedance, or oh, that's because of low impedance. It's like, what the heck are you talking about? And I think that's a subject for another time, really.
'Cause that's about like headphones and stuff.
That's about that's about power transfer, is what that is. Yeah, I mean, because it's about more than just headphones. Headphones is just one of like 10 things.
Oh, well,
you
yeah.
know. I just made that number up. I don't know
Yeah.
how many things.
But when we're a consumer buying something on the market, that's when we run into that a lot of times.
yes, I mean, what's really cool about all of this is that if you have a multimeter, all right, you literally can get a multimeter and take the two probes and find out what the impedance is right there, the resistance in this case,
Hmm.
the ohms of
Yeah.
how many ohms of resistance or impedance is in there. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like if you get like a pair of 16 ohm headphones or whatever, and you measure, it's like it comes out right around 15, 16, 17.
Mm-hmm.
It's very accurate. But yeah, the what to take away from this, the mantra that you want to like write down and try to memorize, is high impedance inputs, low impedance outputs. Took me forever to memorize that. It seems so easy too, but I'd like to talk about that later though. That's a whole nother topic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's generally okay. I got to say this now. Really, what a lot of this goes back to, all my books are going to go falling down. This is a book that I have a hard time reading. It's on the American telegraphy. It's about the telegraph system. That's where
Mhm.
all this stuff comes from.
Hmm.
From the telegraph. That was our first means of communication. That's where Morse code was developed. And
Okay.
this is where we get into dealing with transmission lines and impedance. I mean, a lot of the problems of dealing with live sound were solved in these days with this technology. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I'll make a note of that.
And of course, that led to the telephone industry, Ball Bell,
Huh.
and that's where that led to the study finally of getting some kind of a standard for impedance levels, because
Mhm.
that industry really needed it, and they came up with what's called the 600 ohm standard. And the idea there is your outputs are 600, your inputs are 600, no problem.
Right.
I guess 600 is just a good number. There's a reason why 600. There's a reason why coaxial cables are 50 ohms. They come up with a good compromise that meets all kinds of needs. The problem with the 600 ohm 600 standard, I forgot what the problem is with it. It doesn't work though very well. It worked really well, but the fidelity. Oh, that's what it is. The fidelity of it doesn't fan out. The fidelity of it doesn't really fan out very well. What we discovered instead was that if we use this sort of standard where like all of our inputs are very high impedance,
Mm.
then nothing's really going to harm the input, the circuitry coming into it. Like you could actually hit it with like a 9 volt, take 9 volts into like a lot of guitar pedals into the input, and it's probably not going to do anything. Don't try it though unless you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then very very high, very very low impedance outputs. So that way, nothing is well. See, that's what I'm saying. That's a whole nother topic.
Mm.
It's hard to explain what's going on there because it opens up so many other things. Okay, here's this, and here's this, you know. But what I hope that what I showed you just now with this aside was that there is a clear timeline of a history to how this technology, where it came from, and who did the major innovations, and that led to this, and more importantly, why these silos exist between the recording industry and between the broadcast industry, the television broadcast industry, for example, and even some of the radio stuff. These people don't talk to each other. I don't think people realize that. They don't like each other. They have
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I learned a lot more about that too, about radio and how they've been able to get on the bad side of recording industry. All that.
Oh yeah, man. It's like, you know,
we're not gonna pay. But yeah.
And then, you know, things have changed. You know, the internet has changed the learning process immensely. Like, to understand a lot of this stuff in the 90s, really the only way you'd have to go out and do the job. You know, go work for a studio and learn kind of the hard way. Go hit the road, you know, get a job as a roadie and work your way up the ladder that way.
Right.
YouTube, like, and now because of the dang pandemic, you know, like a lot of people are getting into, you know, into the self-study type kind of thing, which it's a great time right now. You have a lot of time on your hands, and you've got the gumption to do this. You know, like if you can find me, like if anybody listening, if y'all can find me on Discord, you can always ask me any questions about equipment. You know, there's lots of other Discord channels. There's Sid Heresy. There's Dave
Sid
over
Heresy.
Notes and Volts. You know, and these are great places to go. I hang out. That's where I learn, hanging out with those folks. You know.
Totally. It's a whole new world.
But okay, oscillators. What am I using for this one right here? What is this guy? Oh yeah. This was the XR2206. This is a kit that you find on Amazon. It's a red PCB, and it's a little function generator. It generates a square wave, a triangle, and a sine.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one
I was going to build a synth out of 6 of those once.
Yeah. Don't.
No, I realized it wasn't the thing to do.
The problem with this chip is that this is a fake chip, and it works, but it's got limitations, and it's not all that great. There's another one called the XR or the ISL 3088 or something like that. You know, if you need these, I can get, you know. This kit costs $10. The other one, the IS whatever, costs $2. And it's the real deal chip. It's a really good chip, and it's crazy because it's all analog. And yeah, a lot of people don't understand these integrated circuits. You know, what's really going on with these things, and it creates a lot of confusion. You know.
Well, one thing is that I wanted a smooth sine wave, and it wouldn't have done that for me. And that's why I didn't start with
this is what you want for a smooth sine wave, and it's digital. Hate to break it to you.
Well, the oscilloscope itself. You just want an oscilloscope.
No, I'm pointing at the function generator.
Oh, the function generator.
I'm sorry, you can't see what I'm pointing at.
Yeah.
Yeah, this little black box.
Oh, that.
Right here.
Yeah.
This thing is awesome. I'm telling you, this thing is great. I mean, I'm
surprised something like that is so cheap. But then again, there's for Eurorack, there's the Mordax data, and there's a reason why that sells like hotcakes, and they can't make any of their other projects that they want to do.
This was about $120.
They do a lot.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the joke.
Well, I was gonna say they haven't. Mordax hasn't been doing anything but putting out more of the data because of high demand. But they have also been doing other things. But their granular module, the GR1, or the GRX or something like that, it just hasn't come out. And maybe won't, because if they don't have the time.
Okay.
But anyway,
what I can do, I think, maybe, is we can hear the sine wave that I got coming out of here. Now I've got the amplitude set at 0.3 volts. 0.3 volts. One of the first things that I tried to do for myself was I tried to quantify what voltage is. You know, like everybody's familiar with a 9-volt battery. You know, so why 9 volts, why 12 volts, and so forth. But just so like we're just trying to give some kind of a picture of the high and the lows here. This signal coming out the sine wave, its amplitude is zero
Mm-hmm.
point 0.3 volts. Now,
Okay.
let me see if this will work. Yeah. Yay! It's a sine wave. You can hear that, right?
Yeah.
And what's funny, of course, is you know, no, adding effects. Sorry, that was some delay and reverb.
I was like that. I thought so.
Okay, let me change the frequency down here. I mean, that's a really cool sound when you just go up by 100 hertz.
It
Because those
sounds
are,
it sounds great. I mean, if I don't if I hear any wavering at all, it would probably be through the stream. But
there's a square. Unfortunately, hang on a second, let me turn this down. It's so annoying to hear that, though. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, with your board.
Okay. Yeah, you get the point. It's got a whole bunch of cool waveforms I can use. I mean, not just your typical ones, but I mean, it can also do what's called TTL clock pulses,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean, and I can also just have it spit out DC. So I could actually, I haven't tried it, but I think I can actually power something with this. Isn't that crazy? It's a function generator, and it can actually power something. Now, the current draw may be too much for it, so I might not want to actually do that. Really, I mean, it's for use for testing, and what you do is, let me unplug this now. Is since you want to, like, for example, amplify something, right?
Uh-huh.
And I got like the speaker, and the speaker is 8 ohms, 8 ohms, 3 watts.
Right.
And I want to hook this into an amplifier, and I got the speaker coming over here. I'm like, yeah, and I want to like hit it hard, I don't want to actually have to hear that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But what's crazy is that you can't have an unterminated amplifier in these situations. You have to have something out there. Well, guess what? You don't have to use a speaker. You can just use where are they? This is an 8 ohm power resistor.
Okay.
I can hook this up and pretend it's a speaker instead. And that way I can test, using this equipment, I can generate my tone that I want to amplify with my amplifier that I'm building.
And you can just read it at the end.
And I can have an oscilloscope.
Yeah.
But again, you see, this is the hard part to explain, is that like these amplifiers, you have to have a load at the end of them.
Mm.
And so you're going to be having this thing blasting in your ear all the time. And that's what these are for.
Okay.
You can use them for all kinds of things, but that's generally what these are used for. Now, I'm sorry, this is kind of an off-beaten subject.
Yeah.
But
hey, that's the fact that you got far enough into it to get one of those to do that. It's like, wow.
Oh yeah. I totally plan on building all kinds of stuff. Actually, yeah, really, it's that much fun. It really is. Like, I do want to build like an actual guitar amplifier with the big speaker in it.
Nice. Yeah. Oh man, I'm rooting for you.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. But yeah, let me see if I can wrap this up. Like questions about, like, if anybody, did I explain what an oscillator was? Like, the important thing is that you have transistors or vacuum tubes, which can essentially bounce something back and forth. That's a horrible way of stating it, but I mean, it's kind of really at its essence what's going on. Is that you're somehow bouncing a current back and forth, and your capacitors are used to determine the amount of time it takes, the frequency, and the resistors kind of can also help with that as well. And that's really, in terms of analog circuits, I mean, that's really kind of the gist.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different ways, however, than just using 2 transistors. I mean, this may not really help in understanding what an oscillator is at this point, but I think that it's really important to understand the difference between discrete and integrated circuits.
Right. That's what I kind of was trying to get into a little bit.
Okay. Because, like, I mean, I know a lot of people who really think that, like, discrete circuits are going to sound better than integrated
Yeah.
circuits. That what are called jelly bean components, which are like your through-hole components, are better than SMD components. And I don't believe any of that. I don't believe that to be the case at all. It really boils down to the design of the circuit itself,
Hmm.
and how that circuit works with whatever the core thing is, be it an integrated circuit, be it a bunch of transistors and so forth.
Yeah, so bottom line, there isn't just a rule that this is going to sound better because you have this. Always more complicated than that based on what you're working with.
Well, okay, yes and no. For the most part, yeah, but I mean there
Okay.
are different classifications, right? So like you could say like okay, like if I'm going to try to build a certain type kind of thing, if I use a salient key filter, it's going to sound better than this. If I actually do a Bob Moog ladder filter, it's going to sound better than if I just use a regular, just simple RC kind of circuit.
Mm-hmm. And that's true.
But
No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
but I mean the thing is though is that like the simple circuit is only a couple components, whereas the ladder filter is not. Um, okay,
Tyler Allen Johnson, it's good to have you here. Meant
welcome
to mention.
aboard. Let's see. Okay.
That's your big 555 chip.
Yes, yes. I'll see if there's any questions I can answer. Um, any questions that I can understand what the question is, so that I can answer them.
I don't think
Okay.
anyway. Our chat is kind of either astute or they're just happy to listen. Anyway.
And I would hope this would make for a good VOD where you can kind of go back and listen to it.
Hmm. Oh, whoops. All right, what's going on
This
here?
is a giant chip essentially,
Uh huh.
and I don't have like a small one that I could just show you right quick. I don't think. I mean, I kind of do. Yeah, let me do this. Let me do this. Sorry. Yeah, here we go.
That's cool. We froze for a minute on my screen, and I got afraid for a second, but we're
Oh,
back.
that's funny. I see it now. Okay, now let me see if I can even see what I'm pointing at here. This thing right here is an SMD 555 IC.
Mm-hmm.
It's an 8-pin 555, and what I've done is I've soldered it to what's called like a little adapter so that I can use it on a breadboard. Because SMD is hard to work with. Okay, these two are equivalent, the same thing. They are pretty much identical. Pretty much identical. I kid you not. Now, if you look here, I think what it is, it's something like 26 transistors and like 13 resistors or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can really see it, but like this section right here is called the threshold comparator. This section is called the trigger comparator. And this section is the flip-flop, and then finally this final section is the output. And each of these are little sub-circuits, little networks, if you will. And look at all, this one has all these transistors. This one has all these transistors. This one has all these transistors, and finally all of these transistors. What I'm getting at is that, yeah, you can make a circuit, you can make an oscillator with just one transistor.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks. You can't use it. Bottom line, it's practically unusable. This is why Sam, Look Mom No Computer, doesn't use it, right? It's practically, I mean, he has some of them, but nah.
Okay.
It's nice to build on a breadboard and experiment with. The two transistor solution that you see on Collins breadboard, that's not enough. And
Uh-huh.
this gets into impedance. It's not enough because as soon as you hook it into something that's gonna draw it and feed from it, it's gonna drag it down to the ground.
Okay.
It's not powerful enough. I mean, it needs to have enough power to provide a service to the next thing down the line.
Uh-huh. So the alternative being...
The alternative being building networks of these things
Hmm.
that work in
Yeah,
conjunction with
okay.
each other to push the power along. It's a horrible way of explaining it, but that's kind of what's going on here.
Okay.
You have
Cool.
these various
Yeah.
little recipes, building blocks of different ways to put transistors together.
Okay, that makes total sense. I actually never even really got that into my head, that there would be a bunch of transistors in a...
They say it all the time. and I didn't get it either. They say it to us all the time. It's just a bunch of transistors. You're like, what? Whoa, you know? Yeah, it's like they say
I thought
these
one
things.
each.
Oh, okay, gotcha. No, it's bunches and bunches and bunches and bunches. Now, and I am an advocate of using integrated circuits over discrete components, with one exception. If that integrated circuit is no longer able to be produced any longer, we're in trouble. We're getting past that though with the FPGAs, field programmable gate arrays. And also, there's YouTube videos of people who can use chemistry to dissolve the layers, the top layers of the integrated of the package, the package that it's in, and get to the wafers themselves. And they can actually backward engineer what's going on. It's nuts. It's crazy. But it's doable. It's totally doable. And the other thing, of course, is like, with discrete components, it's usually easier to repair, but it's going to be a bigger circuit, right?
Right.
That's generally really the only concern is how easy is it to repair. And I think a lot of people, see, that's the thing, is like if you're not into electronics, you're not even thinking about repair. Like, oh, I can't repair it, so that's not even in my realm of thinking about things. But that's really the name of the game.
Yeah.
Things are being manufactured, unfortunately, to be less repairable, kind of. But no, humans are always innovative and resilient, and we always figure things out. There's a guy I watch on YouTube under the channel Northridge Fix, and he's out in California in the Valley, and he works on like iPhones, tablets, Androids, those kinds of things, and it's all SMD work under a microscope with a heat gun and tweezers and thermal camera, that kind of stuff. So it's like if you want to get into that kind of, like, that's the future, I think, in terms of like things that are going to, like, I mean, a lot of my new gear that I love, like my Cyclone analogic stuff, wow, I don't want to, like trying to repair it's going to be very difficult because, I mean, everything is sandwich thin. The Micro Freak, that might not be so bad. But the problem, like, not tooting my own horn here, but I did actually repair my iPod a while back.
Ah,
It
cool.
wasn't so bad. It was the stereo, the headphone jack. The left side was broken. All I needed to do was just kind of get in there. When I opened it up, however, I didn't know what to expect, and I ripped the cable. Well, I got lucky. It turns out that the whole thing that I needed to order was the cable was part of it. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah, I got real lucky on that one. The hardest part was getting it open and getting closed back together with all of the ribbon cables connected into their connectors and fastened.
Yeah, because it's particularly made to not do that, so that you won't.
Exactly. But we'll figure it out anyways, And if we can't, we'll build robots that will.
Yeah, and the laptops are the same. I realized that there's the one thing on my laptop, the video card, back in the day, or early 2000s, I think it was, that you couldn't replace them on a laptop because they're burned in and all that. But
yeah, it's funny because, like, I'm a software guy and I'm getting in through this, but like I really don't know a lot about hardware and computers.
Well, it's totally different now than anything that I would have just explained just then. But yeah, because it changes so fast.
One thing I wanted to finish up on, though, about this particular integrated circuit, it's called the 555 timer. And remember that Japanese bamboo garden thing I was talking about?
Yeah.
That's basically what this thing does. It basically works the same way. It basically has a chamber, if you will. I mean, I'm trying to think of a better word to use, but it's like a capacitor on the inside of it, really. And
yeah.
When
so
it
it
fills
goes
up,
yeah.
when it fills up to a certain point that you can control with external capacitors and resistors, then it will dump its contents. And after it dumps its contents, with the amount of time that you can control with resistors and capacitors external to the circuit, it fills it back up again.
Yeah.
And it keeps doing that back and forth, and it creates an oscillator. This is one of the most important chips out there. And the op amp is probably the most important. This would be second most important. The applications for this, I mean, there are better ways to produce a clock signal by far, but this will produce a clock signal. You can use this to drive any number of digital circuits. up
Wow.
to, I mean, it doesn't go very fast. You can't really use it for like the gigahertz type kind of stuff. But for like a lot of, digital audio circuits, you will find 555 chips inside of them.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, they're usually the clock. Another function is something that a lot of people don't realize. Something that I didn't realize that I really think we should talk about. I don't have any buttons in here in front of me I can't really find. These encoders are kind of like buttons. You can't really hear it. But every button in an electrical circuit is a switch,
Mm-hmm.
usually nominally open, right? And when
Yeah.
you close it, right? What happens when you close it? I wish you can go to YouTube and you could find videos of this. But what ends up happening is you'll see on an oscilloscope that you've actually bounced, and you've caused several signals to generate from one button click.
Mm-hmm.
And this will prevent that. It'll prevent it by basically buffering what you're doing.
Okay.
And it says like, oh no, I've already been pressed, so I'm not going to do anything, for this interval kind of thing.
Right.
Very, very clever stuff. But what's so cool about this kind of stuff, and with op amps too, is that they're designed in a way for you to have the ability to change their parameters, adjust how fast and how slow they go with external components.
Mm-hmm.
That way, you can use them for a number of uses across the board. And this is why when you look at a circuit, I mean, really, like that's kind of what's going on, like with this circuit in a way. A lot of these capacitors and resistors are just are just configuring how the properties inside the IC are going to operate. I hope that makes sense.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know how yet, but
Well, yeah, because
how it. Yeah.
because
That's the
every
details.
every situation is a little different, And like in the case of the 555, you're controlling the threshold comparator. In other words, like when it
Right.
hits a certain
That makes
point,
sense.
it knows to discharge.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, that does make sense. And yeah, having that big 555 there, that really is a great model
It
for
it really
learning.
is. This is going to look exactly the same, unfortunately, but this one has a red dot on it. This is an op amp. That's
Huh.
what an op. And what's really cool about these also is that I can use these to study. Like it's hard to probe the inside of it. It's impossible to probe the inside of an integrated circuit. You've only got the pins to work with. But here I can work with every transistor and see what's going on.
I'm just imagining a PC the size comparatively.
Oh, okay. Well, that's Ben Eater. Go check out Ben Eater on YouTube.
Oh.
He's building a computer on a breadboard.
Eater, like
Yeah, like
EAT.
Eater. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Like-
he built the world's worst video card with it. So he's actually outputting video with this thing now. It's amazing. And you can buy the whole thing. It's expensive. Like it's really, I would market it to programmers who have day jobs. Making good money, because you can buy all this stuff yourself, and but he's put it all together in a nice package, and it's quality assurance, that too. But it's not a practical thing. It's a learning experience, and I'm not doing it. If you notice, I don't have time for that. Like I would love to.
I haven't got time for that.
Yeah, I got to focus on audio really for this.
Yeah. well, I appreciate you giving me a free course today
Oh,
for 2 hours here.
oh, you're more than welcome. It was my pleasure.
Um,
I don't know how to charge for this stuff.
yeah, I don't know, and we'll see if that 5,000 was real, and obviously that's not for me. That's for the business, and that has to do with you as well. So
I think you should
so
get a
we'll work that
vocoder.
out. That I should be a coder? What are you
No,
talking about?
I think that you
What?
should get the Moog vocoder.
Oh, get the Moog vocoder, yes. so we'll make that decision as we find out what was
Then
going
again,
on
it's
with
like- The tax on that is going to be awful, though.
that. Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you for too much longer.
Yeah, it's. I think nature is calling. And,
Yes.
and I got to eat some dinner now.
I'm bobbing up and down here. I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you so much,
you're
everyone,
welcome.
for coming.
Yeah, yes, thank you everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I hope that what I said was not just a bunch of rambling and it actually was some value to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so next time, next week, we'll most likely have Inky the Cat on next Saturday, same time. So
Awesome.
take it easy till then.
Have a wonderful week, everybody. Happy February.
Bye.